A clash of two dragons will cause blood to drown the valleys. Captured by the fairy folk under the hill, I've remained ageless for 3 centuries. The prehistoric standing stones of Wales guard mysteries that predate any recollection. Echoing through fog-veiled valleys are murmurs dating back thousands of years before Christianity, where the boundaries of reality warp like the early mist atop Snowdonia. Have you pondered why the Welsh terrain feels teeming with unseen observers? Why do those journeying across the Brecon beacons report lights that move with no visible origin, melodies sung in tongues lost prior to Rome's decline, and trails that guide to realms dwelling in the space between two pulses? Step into the enchanted domain of Wales, where the age-old stories of the Mabinogion seep into contemporary life. The Tylwyth Teg continue their reign under mounds and crevices, and Merlin's visions of the red and white dragons still influence the fate of countries. This evening, we venture beyond the tourist-adored rolling green landscapes into the threshold zones where the supernatural seeps into the weave of our existence. I'm Obsidian Vault, your navigator across domains where elven queens insist on their ancestral dues, where the Coon and Noon pursue spirits through the darkness, and prophecies of dragon flames smolder endlessly in the shared consciousness of a culture that never fully relinquished its sorcery to the ordinary world. Ranging from Anglesy's holy woodlands to the spectral heights of Cadair Idris, from the enchanted waters of Lynwy Diwarchan to the infernal valleys of Piz, Wales stands as the final stronghold of Celtic mysticism in a planet that has grown frigid with skepticism. Yet these primordial forces require reverence, impose dreadful costs on those who encroach on their territory, and recall every indignity against their lessened yet never crushed rule. Subscribe to accompany our journey into Celtic mysticism and post a comment telling us which Welsh myth has tormented your sleep since youth. Welsh folklore penetrates further than the coal deposits of the Rhondda Valley, embedded in Celtic customs that withstood Roman domination, Saxon incursions, and Norman oppression. Discovered in church records from 1923, his personal diary exposes someone torn between religious faith and proof of miraculous intervention. The woman shows up at ceremonies sporadically, yet during those times, her piety seems authentic. But I cannot shake the impression that she venerates an entity much more ancient than our Redeemer, reciting devotions in a tongue that precedes Latin, Greek, or Hebrew. Her offspring exhibit restorative abilities that match the New Testament tales of Jesus' wonders. Still, I believe their force comes from sources beyond Christian doctrine. The calamity that dissolved the Union occurred precisely as the prediction forewarned, but in a way that took all by surprise. In December 1862, 15 years following their nuptials, the woman's supernatural essence could no longer be disputed when she retained her youthful appearance without any sign of aging. Whereas Rhee bore the marks of strenuous agriculture and harsh mountain climates, the dispute ignited over a trivial matter, a discussion regarding their oldest child's schooling. Prodded by acquaintances who gossiped about his spouse's eternal looks and peculiar behaviors, Rhee insisted she reveal her genuine beginnings and the origin of her abilities. When she sidestepped his inquiries with light-hearted wit, his irritation erupted into a rage that his grandmother would have identified as deadly madness. "That's enough," he yelled, lifting his arm as though to hit her. "Either you'll respond as a dutiful spouse, or..." But the sentence trailed off when he locked eyes with her and witnessed them gleam with a violet blaze not of any earthly woman. Although his hand never struck, the mere intention sufficed to shatter their age-old agreement. "Oh, my cherished idiot," she murmured, her tone heavy with fate and grief. "You've performed the act I begged you to avoid. The ancient pacts tolerate no concessions, and human fury holds no standing in the Forgotten Realms code." The woman's exit triggered a marvel that nearby farmers still recount in whispers through protracted winter nights. She strode over the icy meadows heading for Lynwy Fanfac, and with every pace, the abundance she had conferred started to disintegrate. Plants decayed in formations that traced her steps. Livestock fell ill and perished. The supernatural wells that had nourished their fields evaporated in a single night. Yet the most poignant element of her departure was the decision she presented to her offspring. They could accompany her to the other world, keeping their magical talents but forsaking the physical plane permanently, or stay with their sire and observe their powers diminish annually. The three sons, ages 14, 12, and 10, found themselves at the intersection of two dimensions as their parents' union evaporated like dawn haze. The oldest, Hywel, opted to trail his mother, disappearing beneath the lake's surface and turning into mythical lore. The younger pair stayed with Rhi, their restorative abilities slowly fading until they appeared largely ordinary, yet neighboring households still delivered ailing youngsters to them, for blessings that possessed abnormal strength. The woman's last present took shape as a vision imparted via dreams that reached each descendant of the Ap Morgan family. When Wales faces its most dire moment, she vowed, when the dragons emerge from their ancient slumber and the elder forces awaken, those born of both realms will return to serve as protectors between mortal and magical worlds. The lineage of the Tylwyth Teg spans eternity, and what was parted through human foolishness will be brought back together by otherworldly imperative. Contemporary academic authorities on Welsh mythology suggest that the Lady of Llyn Fan Fach symbolizes the transformation of primordial Celtic water deity reverence adjusted to fit the medieval Christian framework. Having thoroughly examined the Ap Morgan family archives, Dr. Brunwen Davies from Aberystwyth University observes that this tale mirrors authentic historical conflicts between indigenous Welsh traditions and English cultural hegemony in the 1800s. The lady serves as an allegory for Wales, as Davis articulates in her foundational study of Tylwyth Teg customs. Exquisite, ethereal, endowed with age-old knowledge and might, yet ultimately irreconcilable with contemporary logic-driven civilization. Her leaving embodies the cultural erosion that accompanied swift industrial growth and the Anglicization of Welsh countryside settlements. However, residents near Llyn Fan recount occurrences that defy solely scholarly explanations. At dawn, trekkers sometimes come across a lady strolling along the lake's edge. Her likeness aligns with accounts handed down by the Ap Morgan lineage. She addresses none. Yet those who glimpse her describe immediate recovery from long-standing illnesses and a deep, lasting serenity that endures for several months. The most striking contemporary case took place in 1994. 8-year-old Sarah Ap Morgan, a direct heir of Rhi and the Lady, broke through the ice while skating on a farm pond amid an exceptionally severe winter. After 1 hour, search crews discovered her, cyanotic from hypothermia and exhibiting no vital signs. Just as emergency responders were about to declare her passed, onlookers claimed to observe a female figure clad in white moving across the icy pond toward the child. The stranger did not make it to Sarah, paramedic James Hopkins testified. Yet, as soon as she materialized, the girl's heartbeat and breathing resumed. Her core temperature stabilized at a rate that defied medical understanding, and she exhibited no evidence of neurological impairment, even after extended lack of oxygen. Upon searching for the woman who had been drawing near, we discovered only footmarks that terminated at the water's edge and disappeared. Sarah Ap Morgan made a full recovery and manifested the curative abilities that had bypassed multiple generations of her bloodline, becoming a veterinarian focused on ailments that orthodox medicine could not treat. Her clinic near Llandovery has garnered a renown for miraculous healings that attract patients from all over the UK. The present inheritor of the Ap Morgan tradition, Dr. Owen Ap Morgan, works as a physician in Cardiff, but journeys back to Llyn Fan Fach each summer solstice. Upholding a custom uninterrupted for more than a century and a half, he declines to grant interviews concerning his lineage's paranormal background. Yet associates observe his preternatural skill in identifying ailments that elude other doctors, and his triumph rate with terminally ill individuals that surpasses statistical likelihood. Regional lore asserts that the lady continues to manifest to those who approach her with sincere intentions and urgent necessity. However, her pacts persist as indissoluble as always, and the cost of her endowments still challenges the determination of humans who think they can bargain with the otherworld as equals. Irrespective of whether the Lady of Llyn Fan Fach stands for authentic paranormal interference or the shared psyche of a community striving to preserve its character in an evolving world, her narrative reveals deep verities regarding affection, giving up, and the tolls we incur for enchantment in our existence. On calm mornings, as fog lifts off the dark depths of Llyn Fan Fach, wayfarers sometimes perceive her strolling along the banks, timeless and immutable, anticipating the foretold era when the offspring of dual realms will converge and confront any shadow that menaces the territory she has cherished for countless ages. What cost are you willing to bear in exchange for otherworldly assistance? Post your opinions on whether the lady's contracts signify equitable trade or paranormal manipulation in the comments section below. The Cún Annwn of Cadair Idris, the Otherworld's hunting hounds. Beneath the shadow of Cadair Idris, where Snowdonia's summits lacerate the firmament like age-old javelins hurled skyward, rises a peak whose designation translates to the seat of Idris. While nobody can determine for sure if Idris was a giant, an astronomer, or a monarch, regional folklore holds one thing as unquestionable. Whoever passes a night atop that mountain will return either insane, endowed with poetic inspiration, or fail to return entirely. This domain serves as the hunting preserve of the Cún Annwn, the white-eared redhounds whose howling heralds that the otherworld has come to demand its tribute. Envision the arrival at Cadair Idris on Halloween night 1888, when Professor Aldrich Petton from Oxford's Celtic Studies Department showed up in Dul Jalal, armed with the positivist assurance of Victorian scholarship and a resolve to disprove what he labeled the most tenacious myths of Welsh rural credulity. Petton, who penned rational explanations for Celtic supernaturalism, planned to camp on the summit overnight, record the wholly physical occurrences that spawned paranormal myths, and release a conclusive scholarly article that would relegate the Cún Annwn to the category of discarded tradition. Nearby guides declined to escort him. The innkeeper of the Golden Lion pleaded with him to change his mind. Even the local Anglican minister, Reverend Thomas Price, a cleric with contemporary views and a Cambridge education, advised postponement until the customary perilous time was over. Yet Petton brushed aside their warnings as endearing instances of archaic mentality, persisting in secluded areas, gathered his scientific tools and camping supplies, and departed alone onto the mountain's hazardous inclines. Retrieved 3 days afterwards, and currently kept at Wales National Library. His diary details the shift from academic doubt to paranormal dread with such systematic accuracy that it renders the narrative all the more unsettling. 4:30 p.m. Set up base at an altitude of 2,800 feet. Clear skies. Temperature falling as predicted. The local guide's unwillingness to join me stands as solid proof that superstition lingers in communities without adequate schooling. No abnormal occurrences detected. Barometric pressure within expected range. 7:15 p.m. Awe-inspiring sunset. The valley beneath is cloaked in fog, generating visual deceptions that inexpert eyes readily confuse with otherworldly appearances. Researchers have recorded 17 logical clarifications for accounts of peculiar luminosities upon the slope. Certainty about the Enterprise's outcome stays strong. 9:45 p.m. The temperature has descended faster than foreseen. Wind movements are atypical yet attributable to the mountain's terrain. I imagined I heard far-off hunting horns, yet sheep herding and countryside hunting offer a straightforward rationale. Nothing to worry about. 11:20 p.m. Penning notes by lantern glow. The breeze now bears a clearly melodic character, conjuring the sensation of synchronized wailing. The geological sound properties of mountain structures can generate astonishing acoustic experiences. On multiple instances, I could have vowed I caught Welsh voices shouting, yet echo occurrences are thoroughly recorded in alpine zones. Pemberton's journal entries undergo a shift at the stroke of midnight, as scholarly self-assurance yields to more desperate recordings of events that defied his materialistic beliefs. 12:15 a.m. The physical laws upon this peak seem disturbed. My compass rotates without restraint, declining to point toward magnetic north. Barometer measurements oscillate erratically, even though the weather remains steady. The thermometer indicates implausible values. The air cools while the earth heats up. Never previously have these devices failed at the same time. 12:45 a.m. Once more I perceived hunting horns, far nearer now. The noise possesses an unearthly precision. The tones are well-defined and intentional instead of arbitrary sonic phenomena. I would stake my word that the melody adheres to conventional Welsh hunting signals. Yet who would go hunting during nighttime upon Cadair Idris? I start to grasp why residents shun this location after sunset. 1:30 a.m. Their prey is not wild animals. May the Almighty have mercy. They are pursuing not beasts whatsoever. Regional folklore claimed that the Cún Annwn acted as guides to the afterlife, chasing spirits that had evaded their destined end or perpetrated misdeeds, demanding otherworldly retribution. In contrast to typical phantom canines, these beings stalked with guile and intention, their spectral white silhouettes apparent to individuals designated for supernatural arbitration. Their crimson ears, resembling newly spilled blood, identified them as agents of Aran, the monarch of Anu, the Welsh underworld that runs alongside the human domain. Pemberton's later notes, penned with progressively unsteady script, recount a meeting that revolutionized his very conception of existence. 2 a.m. I caught my initial glimpse of the pack. 12 dogs were present, everyone comparable to a pony in size, their fur snowy white, their ears the shade of streaming blood. They traversed the mountainside without shifting the loose rock, making no footprints in spite of their noticeable mass. Their baying saturates the atmosphere with chords that address the spirit instantly, rather than the auditory organs. 2:15 a.m. The hunter materializes, of a height surpassing mortal dimensions, riding a steed that exhales vapor in place of breath. The hood covering his face appears to consume light, not merely block it, leaving his features shrouded. Whenever his gaze meets mine, the weight of my own mortality bears down like a tangible burden. He knows of my presence. He is aware I do not belong here. Unlike other incarnations of the wild hunt, the Cún Annwn of Cadair Idris demonstrated a clear preference for selectivity. Instead of chasing any mortal who crossed their path, these hounds pursued designated quarry. Their targets seemed to be specific individuals whose deaths were ordained by supernatural judgment. When a hunt began, their howling resonated across 3 counties, yet their mark rarely escaped once singled out. 2:45 a.m. They have located their intended victim. Below my vantage point, a man flees across the mountainside, his movements radiating terror and exhaustion. He constantly glances behind at an unseen presence, stumbling on terrain that ought to be instinctively familiar to a local. The hounds follow at a leisurely pace, as patient as death itself. They are certain he cannot flee. At 3 a.m., I identify the runner as Evan Morris, a wool merchant from Machynlleth, who vanished 6 months ago after being accused of embezzling church funds. Police assumed he had escaped to America, but all this time he had been running across this mountain, pursued by a justice that exceeds mortal law. Pemberton's chronicle of Morris's capture offers the most thorough description ever recorded by a scholar of the Cún Annwn's hunting style. The hounds did not physically attack their prey, but instead encircled him in a pattern that hinted at intelligence, surpassing mere animal instinct. Their howling assumed distinct sequences that seemed to communicate directly with Morris's soul, compelling him to audibly recount his crimes to unseen judges. Morris speaks to an invisible presence, though I see only the hounds and their rider. He catalogs his thefts, not only the church funds but also money taken from widows' pensions and payments diverted from workers' wages. Profits skimmed from grain sales during the brutal winter of 1887. Each confession tightens the ring until he kneels at its center, weeping for absolution from victims who died impoverished while he flourished from their stolen means. When the hunt finally pronounced its judgment, it upended Pemberton's understanding of mortality, justice, and the endurance of consciousness beyond physical life. The huntsman communicates, though I hear no audible voice. Morris's responses imply he is receiving commands, or perhaps a sentence for crimes that transgressed more than human law. The merchant's form becomes translucent, not vanishing, but converting into something belonging to the hound's domain rather than ours. He mounts behind the huntsman willingly, as if accepting a fate he always sensed awaited him. They depart. The pack flows like liquid over impossible terrain, their prize secured, their mission accomplished. As they dissolve into the mountain mist, I realize I have witnessed not supernatural cruelty, but justice operating under laws older and more absolute than any human court could create. Dr. Rian Davies, a folklore expert from Bangor University, who thoroughly analyzed Pemberton's account, observes that the professor's experience mirrors authentic Welsh beliefs about supernatural justice that existed before Christian doctrines of divine judgment. The Cwn Annwn embody an older concept of cosmic order. Davies explains they do not hunt out of malice, but out of necessity. Their prey are individuals who disrupted the natural balance through crimes that earthly authorities cannot redress. Yet Pemberton's suffering had only just begun. After bearing witness to the celestial judgment of the hunt, something indelible was left upon him, forces that insisted he recognize their dominion over universal ethics at precisely 4:30 in the morning. The hounds come back, encircling my campsite in a manner that feels more like assessment than aggression, and the hunter gazes at me, measuring the worth of my spirit against incomprehensible criteria. I realize that my destiny is precarious, reliant upon verdicts issued in tribunals that lie far outside the grasp of human cognition. At 5 in the morning, he utters words in a tongue older than both Welsh and English, and his speech circumvents my hearing, communicating straight to my mind. He poses questions. Do I serve honesty or ease? Does my scholarship pursue learning or acclaim? And does my doubt reflect genuine intellectual virtue or a lack of spiritual courage? 2 options were given to Pemberton, mirroring the Cwn Annwn's duty as keepers of both veracity and fairness. He might go back to Oxford and release the logical accounts he'd written prior to his ascent, contributing to scholarly efforts that label supernatural encounters as unsophisticated fantasy. Alternatively, he could record the actual events he saw, jeopardizing his professional standing and name in service of reality, no matter the cost to his once secure perspective. At 5:15 in the morning, I replied, I'll face whatever outcomes come next. There are certain truths that merit being recorded, irrespective of personal sacrifice. The huntsman gives a single nod, an action that resembles a sacred blessing from a power I am just now starting to comprehend. The hounds retreat, yet I perceive their presence will remain, overseeing my compliance with the duty I've undertaken. The next day, Pemberton made his way down Cadair Idris, forever transformed. He published his narrative, titled Supernatural Justice on a Welsh Mountain, a scholar's encounter with the Cwn Annwn, which ruined his scholarly life, but solidified his reputation as one of the most reliable observers of paranormal events in the folklore of Britain. Fellow academics brushed off his story as symptoms of high-altitude illness, hallucinations from cold exposure, or merely a mental collapse. Still, Pemberton insisted on the truthfulness of his recounting right up until he passed away in 1923. The Morris affair, which Pemberton had watched unfold from the mountainside, was unexpectedly corroborated when law enforcement probing the vanished trader's dealings uncovered proof that verified each theft Morris admitted to during his otherworldly judgment. Financial statements, secret files, and accounts from Morris's assistant brought to light fraudulent manipulations that swindled the area inhabitants of more than £3,000, an amount that could have secured pleasant old age for many laboring households. Even more enigmatic, the funds Morris had taken started finding their way back to those they were stolen from via nameless gifts, accompanied by messages in Old Welsh that only a handful of residents could decipher. When experts at University College Wales eventually cracked the code, the notes merely stated, "Justice recognizes no limit in time, and the departed recall events that the living opt to erase from memory." To this day, accounts of meetings with the Cwn Annwn surface in the vicinity of Cadair Idris, especially when people have evaded worldly punishment for grave offenses. The best recorded contemporary incident took place in 1987, when efforts to locate dishonest County Councillor David Hughes brought law enforcement squads to the mountain sides amidst an October tempest. Michael Jones, the pragmatic former RAF officer in charge of search and rescue who harbored no belief in folktales, submitted an official document containing particulars he later wished to unsay. The first sign was the sound of hunting horns, resounding like church bells even though the gale should have prevented any far-off noise from carrying. Subsequently, we witnessed lights traversing the mountain face in a pattern far too systematic to be natural. Upon arriving at the designated search point, we discovered Hughes's discarded camping equipment. Yet the individual himself had disappeared, leaving no indication behind. Impressions in soft soil that ought to have retained distinct prints remained clear, The enigma of Hughes's disappearance lingered until reporters probing his dealings uncovered proof of fraudulent housing developments that had driven scores of elderly people from homes they had held for generations. Exploiting legislative gaps with precision, these plans were lawful in form yet ruinous in spirit for neighborhoods stripped of inexpensive homes by high-end projects. Mirroring the century-old Morris incident, those wronged by Hughes started receiving untraceable payments that precisely equaled what they had forfeited, conveyed via lawful means that remained beyond the reach of any probe, no matter how thorough. The remittances kept flowing until each impacted household had been restored, then ceased as enigmatically as they had started. Dr. Alan Edwards, a mental health specialist who has analyzed reports of CW and NNW meetings for more than 3 decades. He contends that this occurrence embodies shared subconscious reactions to inequities that standard judicial frameworks are incapable of handling. According to Edwards, the pursuit materializes when populations sense helplessness facing corruption that stays inside legal limits, yet breaches ethical rules. Regardless of whether the event constitutes actual paranormal involvement or a mental reflection, it fulfills an essential role, reinforcing faith that fairness will eventually triumph. However, residents surrounding Cadair Idris uphold a closer connection with the spectral chase. Native households continue to donate parts of their yield at megalithic rings that existed long before Christian colonization gestures, intended to keep their personal ethical tallies even in records maintained by entities more ancient than any parliament or judiciary. This peak itself appears to function as a proving zone, where dividing lines between terrestrial and celestial justice become indistinct. Trekking enthusiasts describe a sense of being observed, notably those burdened by guilt over wrongdoing they inflicted on others. Certain individuals abandon their climb, unwilling to face the reckoning they believe looms at the top. Yet some persist in ascending and come back bearing tales of meetings that wholly transform their existence. Whether the Kun and Noon are genuine paranormal beings or intense mental experiences sparked by terrain and lore, their chase persists over the hillsides of Cadair Idris. These pale canines bearing crimson ears guard the frontier separating structure from anarchy, guaranteeing that certain transgressions never go unpunished, no matter how adroitly their committers dodge worldly responsibility. During nights lacking moonlight, when tempest gales transport surreal melodies over the Welsh highlands and horn calls reverberate from summits where no human chase would dare go, the Kun and Noon instruct us that fairness functions by principles far more definitive than any man-made system could invent. Cries from these hounds tell of reckonings that demand closure, obligations that survive beyond mortality, and an ethical structure that persists well beyond the collapse of empires and the reduction of cultures to ashes. Beneath Cadair Idris, the perpetual pursuit goes on, steadfast as rock and ceaseless as time. Have you ever sensed being chased by results you believed you had avoided? We invite you to share your perspectives on this matter. Divine retribution versus secular law discuss in the comment section. The Four Tales of the Mabinogion. Back when deities mingled with humans in the historic chambers of medieval Wales, as flames dwindled and winter gales screamed about manor and fortress, tellers of tales would commence their finest narratives with phrases that still resonate across ages. When Britain's island boasted 3 principal halls, this phrase introduces the 4 segments of the Mabinogion, narratives so powerful that experts argue over whether they capture genuine historical facts encased in mythical wording. Scholars question if they depict metaphysical truths that go beyond typical human perception. Imagine the royal seat of Tylwyth in 10th century Wales. The finest narrators across the Christian world convened to safeguard recollections of an epoch when divisions between mortal and celestial were as penetrable as dawn fog. These 4 narratives concerning Pwyll, Branwen, Manawydan, and Math were not simply amusement. They served as instruction books for a world in which ideas turned into deeds, where speech held the weight of physical law. Results from godly interference could alter the landscape of entire countries. This evening we examine these stories not as literary works, but as truthful records of paranormal involvement in human events, recorded by observers who realized that certain realities need legendary phrasing to hold their force. Because in the Wales of the Mabinogion, deities roamed. Among secular people, they exacted homage from rulers, and recompensed or chastised entire lineages based on universal rules that rendered man-made fairness trivial. The initial tale, Pwyll's arrangement with the king of Annwn. In 987 AD, per records kept at the monastery of Ystrad Fleur, Prince Pwyll of Dyfed vanished for precisely 366 days, coming back with paranormal abilities that elevated his domain from a modest territory to the wealthy estate within southern Wales. Official royal documents credit his achievements to fresh commercial ties and upgraded farming methods. Yet the bards maintained an alternative reality, one that exposes the cost of celestial pacts and the outcomes of negotiating with forces that gauge time in centuries rather than seasons. Monk Cadwallon, from Ystrad Fleur, the brother who acted as royal analyst throughout Pwyll's rule, recorded events that tested his faith-based views while supplying irrefutable confirmation of paranormal involvement in human matters. His concealed record, stashed within the abbey's walls, and unearthed during repairs in 1896, details occurrences that authorized chronicles left out due to doctrinal issues. The monarch reappeared from his enigmatic departure, altered in manners that resisted rational interpretation. Cadwallon wrote in a Latin laced with dread and amazement. He could foresee meteorological patterns many months ahead, conversed with creatures as though they were nobles, and revealed awareness of faraway incidents that no human source could have supplied. What was most disturbing was that he lacked a shadow under specific lunar phases, as though some essence of him stayed in the world he had come back from. The change in Pwyll started with a meeting that village legends remembered with remarkable precision. When he was out hunting in Glencush Woods, he came upon Aran, the monarch of Annwn, who was pursuing his own spectral quarry. This encounter was deliberate. For many months, Aran had been watching the prince from Wales, judging if he was worthy of a pact that would challenge his integrity and his capacity to thrive in a world where thinking made things real and lying could mean death. The agreement they struck seemed straightforward when recounted, yet it demanded a bravery that only a rare mortal could muster. For 1 year, Pwyll was to govern Annwn while Aran was away, acquiring arcane wisdom and godlike power. In exchange, he had to vanquish Hafgan, Aran's opponent from the beyond, in one-on-one battle that would shift the influence in the spirit world for many ages. Yet the actual challenge wasn't the fighting, it was the act of trickery. Pwyll was to take on Aran's precise likeness and reign over his domain, while Aran wore Pwyll's shape and managed Dyfed. No court, whether human or otherworldly, could ever find out the switch, or the repercussions would affect more than just the two kings. The 12 months Pwyll passed in Annwn gave him knowledge that no school in the mortal world could ever teach. He discovered that the afterlife realm functioned by rules that rendered earthly physics mere rough drafts of profound verities. Time behaved oddly, now extending an instant into what felt like hours, now condensing entire months into a single pulse. Space warped based on desire and aim, not by rigid measurements. Crucially, he found that ideas had actual mass and form, forging realities that lasted well beyond the memory of their creators. The court in Annwn was made up of entities that were originally human but had opted to dedicate themselves to supernal missions instead of resigning to the constraints of mortal life. They knew he was only a brief sovereign, yet they put him to the test ceaselessly, giving him puzzles that demanded otherworldly insight to solve. Every choice he took impacted both Annwn and the world of men, creating waves that would shape the two nations for hundreds of years. The battle with Hafgan, whose title translates to Summer White, was far more than a simple fight between undying foes. Their clash decided if the imaginative energies of the spirit realm would stay balanced or swing toward too much structure or ruinous disorder. Pwyll won by showing self-control instead of brute strength, and this earned him a reputation as a human deserving of holy admiration and lasting partnership. Upon coming back to Dyfed, Pwyll carried with him boons that changed how his kingdom interacted with the otherworld. His land never experienced water shortage, disease, or food scarcity. His subjects cultivated arts and talents that outshone everything in surrounding regions. The most extraordinary outcome was that his court turned into a sanctuary for people looking for fairness that mortal justice couldn't offer, because Pwyll's supernatural training had granted him the power to see facts no matter how cleverly concealed. The next section deals with Branwen's sacrifice and the cauldron that brings back life. The union between Branwen, the child of Lugh, and Matholwch, the Irish ruler, was set up to guarantee tranquility between the two lands, but it let loose otherworldly energies that almost wiped out both nations. This legend holds not only a narrative of political treachery and family pride, but also a record of enchanted items that could bring the deceased back to life, and the awful cost that such potency requires from its users. Princess Branwen, from the Island of the Strong, was famous for being the loveliest lady on earth. Yet her real importance came from her lineage. She was a descendant of Lir, the deity of the ocean, whose sacred heritage meant her offspring could become links between human and godly worlds. When the Irish monarch, Matholwch, asked for her hand, the pact appeared fated to bring about a glittering era of unity among Celtic nations. Nevertheless, Efnisian, Branwen's half-brother, had the mystical gift of detecting lies and evil intentions. He understood that Matholwch's marriage offer, though good for politics, would in the end bring shame and pain to Branwen. His objection, which involved wounding Matholwch's horses in a show of supernatural fury, looked like insane destruction but was actually a prophetic caution about what the union truly meant. In order to fix the broken diplomacy, Bran the Blessed, Branwen's brother and overlord of Britain, gave Matholwch a nuptial present. This gift forever altered the face of war. The cauldron of reincarnation could bring slain soldiers back to life, although they would come back unable to speak. This object, crafted in the netherworld by deities whose identities were lost to history before it even started, gave the ultimate edge in armed conflict. It meant a fighting force that could never be crushed for good. Reports from those times, kept in Irish chronicles that experts for ages rejected as mythical overstatement, detail the cauldron's capabilities. The specifics point to first-hand sighting instead of fiction. The annals of the Four Masters tell of a huge bronze container darkened by many years, inscribed with markings that caused pain for human eyes to look at directly. Fighters lowered into its interior at twilight would come out when morning broke. Their injuries mended, yet their spirits shrank. They battled with otherworldly might, but could not laugh, sing, or talk about their affections anymore. They had tricked death, but existence had been stripped down to a simple purpose. The way Branwen was handled in Ireland exposed the real intention behind the marriage. Instead of respecting her as a queen, Matholwch held her as a prisoner, to force the British to bow to ever more exorbitant demands. Her fall from a royal partner to a scullery maid was not solely a personal shame. It also broke sacred rules about hospitality and divine ancestry. The otherworldly rescue that ended her solitude came from beings that acknowledged her holy lineage. A starling, taught by occult techniques, transported communications between Branwen and her siblings, giving information that ordinary agents could never obtain. This bird's extraordinary talents comprehending human language, covering seemingly impossible spans, and recalling intricate diplomatic secrets set it apart as far more than a mere creature. It served as a messenger from forces seeking retribution for offenses against sacred lineages. Bran's expedition into Ireland to free his sister marks the earliest documented conflict where otherworldly powers and earthly armies worked in unison. The host of the High King traversed the Irish Sea using methods that defy modern interpretations of naval transport. Bran himself became a living causeway for his soldiers, his form enlarging to bridge the gap separating the two lands. The ensuing conflict highlighted the unique tactical challenges posed by magical relics when pitted against traditional warfare. Matholwch's Irish army, bolstered by fighters brought back to life via the Cauldron of Rebirth, displayed undying stamina, yet were deprived of the inventive cunning that breathing troops contributed. They proved incapable of adjusting to shifting combat scenarios, unable to withdraw when required, and lacked the capacity to stir their mortal allies with feats of valor or self-sacrifice. Efnisian's smashing of the cauldron stands as perhaps the most thorough redemptive deed in all Celtic storytelling. Realizing that his own earlier violence had fueled the fighting, he gave his life to shatter the object that kept the war alive. His tactic, concealing himself amidst the fallen foes and annihilating the cauldron from the inside, demanded a level of otherworldly trickery rarely seen among humans. The price of triumph left both realms in ruin. Bran succumbed to envenomed injuries beyond the reach of ordinary medicine. Branwen, though freed, was shattered by her suffering and perished from sorrow upon her return to Britain. Merely 7 Welsh fighters made it through the war, bearing Bran's detached head that kept on uttering prophecies and offering advice for 87 years after his demise. The story of Bran's head being kept in the White Tower of London, where it was said to shield Britain from foreign attack until King Arthur took it away, remains one of the most enduring legends in British folklore. Historical sources indicate that several royal lines performed ceremonies around objects believed to be Bran's head, regarding the relic as a safeguard for the kingdom rather than empty belief. The third branch, Mabinogion and the Enchanted Waste. The tale of Mabinogion fab Lur recounts the most thorough, otherworldly assault on humanity described in Celtic writings. The spell that depopulated the whole realm of Dyfed, leaving just 4 souls to endure a wasteland that tested not only their ability to survive, but also their grasp of reality itself. Mabinogion, sibling to the late Bran and Branwen, came back from the Irish conflict only to discover that the domains he stood to inherit in Wales had been parceled out to newcomers, swearing fealty to various otherworldly masters. Instead of fighting for his holdings through a war that would lay waste to the land, he chose exile and took his wife Rhiannon, the widow of his former comrade Pwyll, seeking solace in family life rather than political maneuvering. Yet their nuptial banquet was disrupted by occurrences that showed how the supernatural still meddled in mortal matters. At the feast's climax, an enchanted fog dropped over the hall. When it lifted, every living soul in Dyfed had disappeared, the only 4 remaining being Mabinogion, Rhiannon, her son Pryderi, and his spouse, Sigfa. Dr. Rachel Morgan from Cardiff University, who researched archaeological signs of large-scale population movements in 10th century Wales, observes that the Mabinogion narrative aligns with breaks in settlement data that standard theories fail to explain. A number of locations across southwestern Wales reveal signs of swift desertion during this era, Morgan points out. Implements were found in the middle of work, meals left half-eaten on tables, animals roamed with no one tending them. According to archaeological findings, whole settlements disappeared all at once, with no clue as to their destination or reason for leaving. These 4 survivors confronted trials that stretched their everyday survival instincts, as well as their capacity to solve otherworldly puzzles. The very terrain had shifted. Well-known trails now ended at impossible places. Springs and streams came and went without any natural rhythm, and the weather behaved in ways that mocked the seasons. They attempted to hunt and gather, yet the animals they trapped frequently turned out to be phantoms that evaporated while cooking. The plants they collected sometimes became uneatable when they tried to cook them. Their effort to start fresh as artisans in neighboring realms uncovered another layer of the curse. Mabinogion had an unnatural gift for leatherworking, cobbling, and similar crafts, enabling him to produce such excellent items that local craftspeople could not match him. Yet those who grew envious and attempted to attack him found that the spell shielded him in ways that horrified onlookers. Whenever someone lifted a weapon against him, the tool would shatter. If his safety was threatened, structures would burst into flame. Misfortunes befell his adversaries with such perfect timing that a supernatural hand seemed at work. The origin of the enchantment slowly emerged through episodes that challenged each survivor's prudence and bravery. Pryderi's vanishing while chasing a magical boar revealed that their foe was Hwyd fab Sil Coed, a wizard bent on vengeance for old offenses done to his kin. His might sprang not from his own talents, but from a pact with supernatural entities who harbored grudges against the royal lineage of Dyfed. Rhiannon's later imprisonment, after she followed Pryderi into the spectral stronghold that materialized overnight beside their dwelling, unveiled the real intent behind the magic. The warlock aimed not simply at retaliation, but at wiping out all traces of divine ancestry from earthly rule, supplanting the offspring of gods with sovereigns loyal to otherworldly entities. To resolve the crisis, Manod needed a blend of otherworldly insight and earthly shrewdness that few humans could ever muster. Instead of launching a direct assault on the spectral fortress, he seized the sorcerer's wife as she took on a mouse's shape to pilfer grain from his fields. By threatening to put her to death as an ordinary thief, he compelled Luid to bargain for the freedom of every captive and the return of Deed's lost people. These negotiated terms set standards for otherworldly jurisprudence that would shape Welsh rule for many generations. Though Luid removed his spell, he kept the authority to remedy later wrongs via supernatural tribunals instead of human bloodshed. The people he had concealed came back with their recollections untouched, yet they bore insights into the spectral domain that quietly shifted how they viewed ordinary life. The fourth branch, math, fab, mthoni, and the breach of sacred law. Within the Mabinogion, this branch records the most intricate otherworldly legal dispute found in Celtic lore. It recounts an offense against divine order so severe that only the gods could correct it, their actions transforming nature itself to re-establish universal equilibrium. Mathfab Mthoni, ruler of Gwynedd, bore godlike traits that set him apart from ordinary humans. His survival depended on his feet being cradled in a maiden's lap, though this condition was waived under otherworldly law during periods of warfare. What appeared to be a random limitation was in truth his role as a living link between the human and the eternal. His godlike essence demanded continuous contact with virtue and chastity to keep his might from wreaking havoc on earth. His nephews Gwion and Gylfethwy were also adepts in the occult, masters of deception, shape-shifting, and dealings with the spectral realm. Yet Gylfethwy's infatuation with Gowan, the maiden who held Math's feet, drove him to acts that transgressed both mortal and sacred ordinances. The repercussions of those misdeeds rippled through the very fabric of nature. The strife between Gwynedd and Dyfed, which Gwydion orchestrated to divert Math from his throne, started as a political clash but grew into a spiritual confrontation, as each faction summoned otherworldly champions and enchanted objects. The boars gifted to Gwydion by the king of Dyfed originated from creatures that were artificially fashioned, not naturally born. These beasts boasted abilities beyond those of typical farm animals. This offering marked the earliest known instance of employing artificially constructed life as instruments of trade and warfare. By assaulting Gowan while Math was away, Gylfethwy broke several levels of celestial law at once. He struck a lady safeguarded by the divine and shattered the universal harmony that Math's restriction preserved. Moreover, he showed disdain for spectral governance, an offense that demanded supernatural retribution. Math's reaction unveiled a form of divine adjudication based on precepts that made earthly courts appear crude. Instead of merely putting his nephews to death, he changed them into mating couples of deer, pigs, and wolves. He compelled them to undergo violation and helplessness through these forms, so they could truly grasp the gravity of their sins. The 3-year span of punishment produced young whose essence mirrored the occult circumstances of their origin. These offspring, born of shape-shifted deities, possessed powers beyond mortal bounds while still bearing human traits. Through what seemed like infinite generations, their existence founded family lines carrying godly qualities. Standard family bloodlines were upended. Gowan's reparation, her rise as Math's queen, and her equal share in his godly power marked groundbreaking progress in spectral jurisdiction. Instead of viewing her as a broken casualty, Math understood that grave offenses against sacred order could open doors for spiritual growth that helped the whole society. Blodeuwedd was fashioned from blossoms by occult means to become the spouse of Lulao Gifts, functioning free from natural biological limits. Yet her eventual treachery against her husband exposed the perils of bringing aware beings into existence without granting them the seasoned understanding that natural growth imparts. The supernatural restrictions binding Lu, that only in such exact conditions, nearly impossible to set up, could he be slain, mirrored a spectral comprehension of destiny and defense that followed symbolic, not physical, rules. After his death and subsequent revival, thanks to Gwydion's actions, new models for occult restoration were set, affecting Welsh sorcery for hundreds of years. Contemporary academics are divided over whether the 4 branches document real historical figures with paranormal powers, or if they function as symbolic lessons, embedding deep psychological and spiritual truths within mythological narratives. Yet the discussion remains ongoing. Artifacts and records indicate that medieval Wales encountered events that defy ordinary rationalization. Abrupt shifts in population, technological advances beyond the era's known skills, and political transformations achieved via means that history fails to fully record. Regardless of whether the Mabinogion holds factual accuracy or metaphorical insight, these tales still shape Welsh identity far beyond their literary significance. These narratives offer patterns for identifying godly involvement in human lives, instruct on how to deal with otherworldly entities, and caution that certain powers adhere to cosmic rules surpassing any mortal governance. The four branches serve as a reminder that in Wales, the line separating mankind from the divine stays fluid. That speech carries a creative force capable of altering existence, and the repercussions of otherworldly interference ripple across centuries after the initial events slip from memory. Within fogged valleys that gave rise to these tales, ancient deities continue to roam alongside humans, still insisting on recognition of their dominion, and still dispensing reward or retribution based on universal principles that render mortal justice mere shadows staged for those unaware of moral gravity. Which branch resonates most with your sense of justice and universal harmony? Let us know your reflections on supernatural interference in the comments section. Merlin's Prophecy of Dragons. The crimson and pale dragons shaping Britain's fate. Beneath Dinas Emrys, amid Snowdonia's summits holding mysteries predating recorded memory, is the arena where two serpents have clashed since prior to the Roman arrival on British land. They are not simply mythical creatures, but animate emblems of primal energies, dictating the destiny of entire peoples. The Welsh red dragon and the Saxon white dragon remain caught in an endless struggle that influences the fate of all who inhabit these isles. Imagine yourself in the court of Vortigern the Usurper, around 447 AD, when Britain's High King called upon his most learned advisors to clarify why his stronghold at Dinas Emrys crumbled every night, regardless of how expertly his stonemasons constructed its walls by daylight. Common theories shifting earth, faulty building, intentional destruction by rivals had all been examined and ruled out. The monarch confronted occurrences that defied both architectural wisdom and political logic, necessitating guidance from consultants functioning beyond standard paradigms. Among the respondents to Vortigern's call was a boy of ambiguous lineage, the offspring of a Welsh princess and a father who could have been a celestial being, a fallen entity, or an essence beyond those categories. This child, later famed as Merlin, possessed traits that made him a conduit between human and divine domains, able to see hidden truths and utter prophecies that actively formed reality, instead of simply foretelling it. Friar Gildas, a 6th century monk, whose work, De Exitio Britanniae, supplies the first written record of these occurrences, recorded events that tested his Christian beliefs, yet offered irrefutable proof of otherworldly involvement in British affairs. His hidden manuscripts, kept at Llanthony Abbey and uncovered during restorations in 1847, detail meetings that institutional church records excluded for doctrinal purposes. The boy's words carried an authority not of any human tongue, Gildas recorded in Latin, that revealed both terror and intrigue. Upon being asked about the stronghold's shortcomings, he let out a laugh so unnerving that it sent shivers down the spines of battle-hardened soldiers, then ordered Vortigern's troops to excavate under the base stones. Exactly as the young seer had foretold, they uncovered a subterranean lake that had escaped all surveys, even after months of meticulous groundwork. Yet this hidden body of water was only the start of discoveries that would completely change how the British perceived their land's real essence. Under those shadowy depths rested a stone vault, untouched since time immemorial, housing two slumbering dragons. Their eternal struggle embodied the very forces dictating the ascent and decline of Britain's realms. The Crimson Dragon, ageless beyond comprehension, symbolized the soul of the Celts, those who pioneered bronze craftsmanship, erected stone monuments that tracked the stars, and founded hallowed groves where druids imparted knowledge that Rome failed to obliterate. Its might came directly from the land. Springs never ceased to flow, and the earth stayed fruitful even under neglect. Woodlands rebounded from blazes that should have left them barren forever. The pale dragon embodied the Saxon invaders, who came as hired soldiers but stayed as rulers. They introduced fresh deities, novel legal codes, and a different rapport with nature, one that valued extraction above coexistence. Its power stemmed from structure, training, and the capacity to enforce consistent rules over varied lands. While the red dragon adjusted to local circumstances, the white dragon aimed to reshape the terrain to fit fixed templates. The prophecy of Merlin, spoken in archaic Welsh from before the Romans arrived, unveiled the cosmic importance of this struggle. Look upon the dragons that have slumbered under the rock since the dawn of time. From the western oceans ascends the crimson dragon, clutching the aspirations of the Cymry in its talons, exhaling flames that cleanse instead of annihilate. The ivory dragon emerges from the eastern flatlands, wielding blades that slice precisely, yet inflict unhealing injuries. Its breath is frost, that conserves but stunts all growth. The clash between these beasts determines this island's destiny, far more than any conflict among human monarchs. Whenever the dragons engage in combat, the entire earth quakes. When the red dragon soars to its peak, the old traditions thrive. Ancient wisdom proliferates, and the landscape recalls its voice for those who heed with reverence. When the white dragon prevails in flight, a fresh order rises from turmoil. Commerce thrives over vast expanses, and the fragmented clans rally behind flags that prioritize legislation over tradition. Yet neither can claim lasting triumph, as they embody principles that need mutual opposition to sustain universal equilibrium. Deprived of the white dragon, the red dragon grows static, ensnared in customs unable to evolve. In the absence of the red, the white dragon turns despotic, enforcing a uniformity that suppresses the variety from which genuine power arises. The instant effect of this disclosure drastically shifted Vortigern's grasp of politics and his military strategies. The stronghold failures happened because he tried to erect structures on land hallowed to powers that his pact with the Saxons had insulted. By acknowledging the struggle of the dragons and modifying his approach to honor both Celtic and Saxon spiritual rites, he could build lasting defenses that honored, not disrupted, the cosmic harmony. However, Merlin's foretellings went well beyond short-term construction issues, addressing the very fate of the British people. The manuscripts preserving his visions, credited by chroniclers to early Welsh bards, whose pagan themes could have drawn disapproval from Christian leaders, portray cycles of ascent and descent recurring endlessly until the dragons finally attain lasting harmony. During the era of Saxon rule, I behold the white dragon prevailing. Roman jurisprudence bends to Germanic traditions, and fresh tongues arise from the fusion of victor and vanquished. Urban centers spring up where nomadic tribes once roamed. Commercial paths now transport merchandise over spans that appear unimaginable to those acquainted solely with regional barter. Yet the red dragon awakens as Arthur's blade heralds the onset of a fresh epoch. Whenever British defiance demonstrates that occupation may be fleeting, and the very terrain combats for those who grasp its profound essence, the Round Table assembles champions devoted to righteousness over any mortal sovereign, forging a brotherhood that surpasses the rifts politics engenders. But even Arthur's renown diminishes. When the equilibrium of the dragons tilts anew, introducing Norman governance that fuses Celtic insight with Saxon structure tempered by French rigor, the white dragon evolves, coming to appreciate the ancestral wisdom it previously aimed to eradicate. The red dragon realizes that endurance occasionally demands alliance with powers it once deemed wholly ruinous. According to Dr. Geoffrey Williams from the Center for Advanced Welsh and Celtic Studies, these forecasts reveal a grasp of cultural interplay. The oracles go beyond merely foretelling triumphs or losses on the battlefield. Williams clarifies that they depict a more profound progression over centuries. Societies ingest, accommodate, and reshape one another. The dragons of Merlin embody cultural currents that move in discernible rhythms. Monarchs may sway, but cannot entirely command these rhythms. The most unsettling prophecies encompassed glimpses of eras when both dragons would collapse. These perils came from outside the British Isles altogether. Merlin envisioned incursions by moon crescent worshippers. Such invasions would compel the heirs of Celts and Saxons to band together against shared foes or suffer cultural annihilation. Even more disturbing were glimpses of a future where iron dragons fly across heavens that spew flames. The planet grows ill from injuries no plant medicine can cure. Humans' command might comparable to deities yet possess no sagacity. These oracles, inscribed ages prior to the invention of gunpowder, depicted advancements in technology that would not manifest for a millennium. The most enigmatic predictions dealt with the final fate of the red and white dragons, their ultimate metamorphosis into one entity. This gilded dragon would represent harmony and appear at the moment the island confronts its bleakest crisis. Historical records indicate that numerous British rulers sought to realize these prophecies via governmental measures. The Welsh princes retained royal poets who tailored dragon oracles to bolster assertions of rightful lineage. Norman monarchs tasked historians with proving that their reign embodied the foretold fusion of opposing powers. The most organized endeavor took place in Tudor times, when the marriage of Henry VII was portrayed as the merging of red and white dragons. This alliance aimed to conclude the Wars of the Roses via both supernatural and political channels. Royal court rites involved ceremonies appealing for celestial favor. Henry's Crimson Dragon standard wove Welsh sovereignty into English regal iconography. Contemporary Celtic revivalists contend that the dragon oracles continue to shape British governance beyond mere legend. In the Second World War, Churchill employed dragon symbolism reminiscent of Merlin's forecasts regarding consolidation against existential perils. In 1959, the red dragon was adopted as Wales's official flag, confirming the prophecy's ongoing significance to British identity. Yet the most persuasive proof exists in the portrayal of cultural dynamics that still mold British society. The friction between regional heritage and centralized control, the balancing between Celtic and Anglo-Saxon principles, all mirror the rhythms Merlin recognized. Recent dragon encounters near Dinas Emrys retain features linking them to the ancient prophecies. Observers depict beings that exhibit symbolic rather than tangible attributes. The red dragon appears amid rebirth, the white dragon during institutional upheavals. The best recorded sighting in 1999 revealed strange atmospheric disruptions, reminiscent of dragon silhouettes. Scientific investigation failed to account for the forms or inconsistencies. According to local lore, dragons continue to stir beneath Dinas Emrys, their struggle shaping the fate of Britain in rhythms that Merlin comprehended. Nowadays, their confrontations manifest via cultural shifts, governmental changes, and artistic rebirths that borrow from both heritages. Be it actual foresight or merely cultural interpretation, these oracles offer lenses to comprehend British identity, surpassing simplistic political divisions. The crimson and ivory dragons serve as a reminder that national identity arises from persistent friction between opposing principles. During wintry evenings, residents detect noises of massive wings thrumming through air too rarefied to sustain normal flight. The dragon's strife persists in the space between myth and fact, between the Wales of old and the Britain still unfolding. According to Merlin's oracles, final harmony will come when the people appreciate both time-honored knowledge and flexible change. That golden dragon yet slumbers under Dinas Emrys, awaiting a cohort sufficiently enlightened to rouse it without trepidation. Do you perceive the red and white dragons still contending in contemporary Britain? Express your views in the comments section below. The savage chase, led by Gwyn ap Nudd, sovereign of the supernatural realm, takes place amid the summits of Snowdonia. In this locale, when barriers become permeable, the most dreadful vision in Celtic legend manifests, the spectral hunt that collects spirits. Envision the journey to Glastonbury on the winter solstice of 1642, where Brother Thomas Pellingham sought refuge. Pellingham came armed with rational conviction, resolved to uncover scientific reasoning behind paranormal events. The diary unearthed in 1907 chronicles the shift from doubt to dread. Its meticulous detail renders it unsettling. Entry for the 19th of December, 1642. Set up lodging in the abbey remnants. Villagers decline to come near once dusk falls. Their superstitious beliefs attest to their lack of knowledge. I am determined to pass the solstice night atop the tor. December 20. The weather has grown violent. The wind bears noises resembling hunting horns. On multiple occasions, I imagined hearing utterances in Old Welsh, but acoustic reflections generate such delusions. On December 21st at 10:30 in the evening, I write by the glow of firelight. My devices register readings that defy possibility. The magnetic compass spins without restraint, and the barometer swings erratically, even though the weather remains steady. Now I start to grasp why those prone to superstition might blame eerie forces for these strange yet certainly natural occurrences. Pellingham's writing shifts dramatically at the stroke of midnight, as the winter solstice plunged to its nadir and the separation between the earthly and eternal worlds vanished completely. At 1:45, I once again caught the sound of hunting horns, far nearer and clearer than before. That noise possesses an uncanny distinctness over spans that ought to muffle any exact sonic transmission, and I would nearly vow the tune matches ancient Welsh hunting signals. Yet who would pursue game after dark upon Glastonbury Tor in December? At midnight their quarry is no wild beast. Dear Lord, shield my spirit. They chase something infinitely more valuable and perilous. According to local belief, Gwyn ap Nudd acted as a guide of souls for the Celtic underworld, captain of the wild hunt. This spectral company collected those who had evaded their destined end or perpetrated misdeeds, demanding otherworldly retribution. In contrast to the Cún Anún, which targeted particular persons destined for otherworldly sentencing, Gwyn's hunt functioned on a far vaster plane. It gathered the unsettled departed, upheld universal decrees, and preserved the equilibrium between existence and oblivion that enabled both worlds to operate harmoniously. The later passages of Pellingham, scrawled in ever more unstable script, record a meeting with forces that overthrew his comprehension of existence, mortality, and holy sovereignty. I witnessed the hunt for the first time. God, protect me. What human language can capture such dreadful splendor? The horsemen count in the hundreds, astride steeds that exhale beams of starlight rather than breath. Their chieftain, towering above mortal scale, adorned with antlers that ensnare lunar rays like crystallized lightning, gazes over his realm with such dominion that worldly monarchies appear as infants brandishing toy blades. He has marked me. When Gwyn ap Nudd fixes his gaze upon a human, that individual senses his own fragile existence pressing down like an actual weight. Within his gaze lie vastness that mirrors not the current instant, but every decision that culminated in this meeting, every outcome that will stem from whatever transpires. Gwyn ap Nudd embodied the most intricate entity in Welsh otherworldly order, neither wholly kind nor utterly wicked, fulfilling roles that went beyond human ethical divisions. Sovereign of the Tylwyth Teg, he governed the fairy race with prudence that tempered their whimsical temper against the demands of both earthly and celestial domains. As master of the winter chase, he implemented universal statutes rooted in traditions predating Christian doctrine. The hunt has located its prey. Spirits ascend from the ground encircling the Tor's foot, not freshly departed, but entities that have long evaded their ordained journey to whatever domain lies beyond the grave. Several look like warriors slain in the ongoing civil strife. Others appear far more ancient, possibly from battles that chronicles have erased. Each carries the guilty awareness of those who escape demise via occult methods rather than yielding to their ordained end. The Wild Hunt's mode of gathering tested Pellingham's religious notions of mortality, judgment, and celestial fairness. Instead of chasing spirits with brutality, Gwyn's cavalcade encircled them with such grandeur that opposition appeared not only pointless, but ridiculous. The deceased approached without reluctance, pulled by a power that offered settlement rather than penalty, enlightenment rather than blame. Gwyn converses with every spirit separately, though I perceive no sound. His judgment follows regulations far more intricate than any human tribunal could craft, weighing not only actions but intentions, barriers erected, lessons absorbed. The hunt's judicial proceedings unveiled universal law functioning under guidelines that rendered mortal justice crude in contrast. Gwyn evaluated not merely deeds but drives, not only transgressions but their ripples through many generations, and not solely personal decisions but their effect on the equilibrium between structure and disorder. Certain souls he frees, dispatching them toward luminous points emerging in the distance. Gold for those who labored righteously despite their faults, silver for those who gleaned wisdom from agony, white for those whose affection overcame their dread. Yet others he collects into his retinue, not as penalty, but as acknowledgement that their essence fits them for otherworldly duty instead of a typical existence beyond. He steps toward me straightway. Confronting Gwyn ap Nudd, I realize I encounter not just a lord of the Fae, but an elemental power of universal harmony. He poses inquiries that circumvent all speech, addressing my very soul regarding decisions I have taken, vows I have betrayed, verities I have shunned because they unsettle my snug convictions. The trial Gwyn gave to Pellingham mirrored the Wild Hunt's role as distinguisher of reality from deception, authentic devotion from hollow compliance, sincere ministry from selfish religiosity. The monk's academic arrogance, his presumptions of religious excellence above common knowledge, his sheltered remoteness from the agony the Civil War imposed on commoners, everything faced examination by a power that assessed spirits instead of qualifications. He presents me with an option. I may go back to my academic endeavors, composing erudite essays that separate me from tangible existence, worshiping God via mental endeavors that alter nothing in reality. Alternatively, I can embrace the truth that genuine ministry demands involvement with powers that religious schooling cannot clarify, enigmas that require trust rather than comprehension, authority that surpasses organizational ranks. I provided my response and will endure whatever outcomes ensue. Certain realities can be acquired solely via immediate contact, and certain duties call for forsaking the comfort of established knowledge. Gwyn gives a single nod, a motion that seems a blessing from might. I have only started to comprehend. The metamorphosis Pellingham underwent during his meeting with the Wild Hunt brought about alterations that remained long after the solstice night concluded. He forsook his academic existence to turn into a nomadic physician, journeying across battle-ravaged England with capabilities that appeared beyond ordinary talent. His methods mixed age-old herb lore with practices that onlookers deemed uncanny. By mere touch, he could identify ailments, foresee recovery periods with astonishing precision, and bring about healings that mainstream medicine deemed impossible. Church leaders initially suspected sorcery, but his unwavering commitment to Christian values and refusal to charge for his services slowly won them over. Even more notably, fighters from both factions of the Civil War came to him, discovering a medic they could rely on. His aura surpassed political divides. Historian Dr. Margaret Thornton, who has delved into Pellingham's later years, contends that his meeting with Gwyn ap Nudd was a genuine spiritual evolution rather than a simple mental collapse. Contemporary sources thoroughly document his healing abilities, Thornton explains. Army surgeons, local doctors, and church officials all confirmed recoveries that defied medical logic. Additionally, his aura appeared to soothe the religious and political animosities that were fracturing communities during the Civil War era. Yet the Wild Hunt's reach went beyond personal change, encompassing the larger clash between rival Christian doctrines that defined the Civil War. Gwyn's supernatural influence crossed denominational lines, providing spiritual encounters that merged pre-Christian knowledge with authentic Christian belief. Today, those visiting Glastonbury still recount modern sightings of the hunt, often driven by spiritual quests rather than idle curiosity. These incidents follow links to age-old customs while evolving with modern circumstances. Healings beyond the natural, meetings with entities guiding life transitions, and visions that resolve grief beyond conventional comfort all persist. The most thoroughly recorded recent instance took place in 1987, when Margaret Blackwood, a social worker suffering PTSD from investigating child abuse, climbed Glastonbury Tor during a mental breakdown that nearly drove her to suicide. Her story, recorded in therapy sessions and backed by multiple witnesses, shows the Wild Hunt's ongoing role in healing those whose devotion to others has harmed their own spiritual health. "I climbed the Tor, intending to leap from the top," Blackwood stated, at a 1992 conference on supernatural healing. "But upon reaching the summit, I saw beings not of this world. They said nothing, yet conveyed that my anguish came from bearing loads never meant for mortal shoulders alone. They lifted from me the visions and recollections that were destroying my ability to function. Not erasing them, but dividing the burden so I could keep working without being crushed by its emotional toll." Blackwood went back to social work with renewed energy and skills that amazed her colleagues. She could detect abuse cases that others overlooked, connect with traumatized children who wouldn't talk to anyone else, and stay emotionally balanced in situations that caused severe exhaustion in most professionals. Her track record in settling children into safe, caring homes far exceeded department averages, as if supernatural forces guided the placements. Modern Celtic spiritual practitioners claim that Gwyn ap Nudd embodies aspects of divine power that mainstream Christianity often ignores. The untamed forces of sacred energy defy institutional control yet serve crucial roles in preserving cosmic order. His Wild Hunt still operates today, gathering souls that require otherworldly mentorship. It heals trauma that ordinary therapy cannot reach, and enforces spiritual rules that cross denominational boundaries. Whether the wild hunt is genuine supernatural intervention or powerful psychological reactions triggered by landscape and folklore remains uncertain. Yet its encounters continue to reshape lives in ways conventional religious practices often cannot. Gwyn ap Nudd's dominion addresses facets of human spiritual yearning that organized religion may struggle to fulfill. There exists a craving for direct connection with sacred power. There is a desire for justice beyond human limits, and a yearning for healing more profound than medical or psychological methods can offer. On winter nights, the wind screeches across Glastonbury Tor, and strange lights dance around the ancient abbey ruins. Locals occasionally hear the hunting horns announcing Gwyn's arrival. The wild hunt continues its endless circuit, collecting souls in need of otherworldly guidance. It resolves debts that earthly courts cannot settle, and sustains the equilibrium between order and chaos that keeps both realms functioning according to divine intent. In the court of Gwyn ap Nudd, the lines between life and death, justice and mercy, ancient wisdom and modern necessity blend into unity. That unity serves goals grander than any individual soul can grasp. The wild hunt reminds us that certain authorities operate by laws more absolute than human institutions can create. Some healing demands supernatural intervention, and certain service goes beyond mortal comprehension. The hunting horns still echo across the Welsh mountains, summoning souls. They crave justice that surpasses human limits. They crave healing deeper than ordinary comfort can offer. They crave authority that serves the cosmic good, rather than selfish gain. In the mist-covered peaks where Gwyn ap Nudd holds his court, the wild hunt continues its eternal watch. It ensures that cosmic law conquers chaos, that genuine service receives supernatural aid. It also ensures that the balance between worlds remains steady despite the conflicts raging within them. Have you ever witnessed healing or justice that seemed beyond earthly explanation? Share your experiences with supernatural intervention in modern life in the comments. And so, our exploration of Wales's most magical lands concludes. Yet the forces we've encountered continue their eternal watch over valleys, where Celtic magic never fully yielded to the modern age. The Lady of Llyn Efyf offers transcendent beauty, and Gwyn ap Nudd's wild hunt provides cosmic justice. The Mabinogion presents divine drama, and Merlin's dragon visions offer prophetic flames. These otherworldly protectors mirror Wales' distinct role as the storehouse of Britain's most powerful mystical traditions. What sets Welsh supernatural lore apart from other Celtic mythologies? These forces embody the core paradoxes within the Welsh experience. A conflict exists between ancient wisdom and flexible inventiveness, between local loyalty and universal duty. Another conflict lies between the longing for peace and the requirement of perpetual watchfulness. These are protectors that both test and defend. These stunningly beautiful creatures exact a cost that brings about transformation rather than simple recompense. They are faithful attendants, whose devotion transcends even death itself. Welsh supernatural entities never merely grant wishes or hand out effortless answers. The Lady of the Lake insists on unwavering obedience to otherworldly law. The Cababro and Anarian administer justice according to cosmic rather than earthly norms. These beings offer chances for personal evolution that call for wisdom, courage, and a readiness to accept responsibilities beyond personal desires. The deities of the Mabinogion summon humans as collaborators in preserving universal equilibrium. Merlin's dragons embody energies that need balancing rather than vanquishing. Gwyn ap Nudd's hunt gathers spirits for a service that surpasses any earthly vow. These tales uncover deep insights about Welsh spiritual life, that authority arises from connection rather than control. They further demonstrate that knowledge demands modesty in the face of powers beyond human comprehension. And they reveal that genuine devotion persists after death, because universal requirements outweigh personal mortality. These tales mirror a people who learn to safeguard their most profound beliefs by adjusting them to shifting realities while preserving their core potency. Modern mechanization may have erased many customary settings for supernatural encounter. Yet Welsh lore maintains that the ancient powers still endure, evolving to meet present-day tests while keeping their age-old missions. Whether they sanctify contemporary healing arts or condemn ecological devastation, these entities continue their work that historical upheavals never interrupted. The holy woods of Anglesey and the dragon-infested peaks of Snowania are part of this domain. The fairy courts hidden beneath Welsh hills and the prophetic voices that still whisper on mountain winds likewise contribute. Wales is still a land where the other realm seeps into daily life for those who preserve the sight to perceive and the spirit to comprehend.